Hello, everybody. I hope you're all having a great day. I certainly had a wonderful morning talking to someone for another one of my podcasts that you can hear later. And now I have Ms. Sue Camaione, who is a healthcare research writer in Washington by day, but she also plays drums to hardcore rock and roll at night. And she writes dark comedies about sexual awakening and female empowerment in between. You're my clone, except for the drums. Say hello, Sue.
Hello. Thanks so much for having me, Mimi.
Oh, I can't wait. This sounds so interesting. And you're a dancer, right? You're like the Jacqueline of all trades. Okay. So the name of your upcoming book is The Practical Seductress. And it's an inspiring tale of resilience in a world where men seek adventure and women find shame, and all in the purpose of pleasure. And before you tell me anything about that, I relate because my first book was a memoir, and my husband's family was not happy. And I purposely was not graphic because I have grown children that would not want to read that stuff. So I got a kick out of it. I didn't read it yet, but I'm going to because it sounds great. So you have a day job in Washington, you're playing the drums, you're writing, you're a dancer, you got the book coming out. And what can you tell us about the book that I already haven't mentioned?
The book is actually not only a pursuit of pleasure, but it's also dealing with a double standard with pursuing an education, equality in an unequal world, and basic freedoms that I'm old enough to. Takes place during the 70s and 80s, so it was the second wave of the women's movement. The first was my grandmother, who was a suffragette. So
Oh,
I was raised in a very
wow.
progressive household with a grandmother who inspired this tale. She was very sharp tongued, and people listened. She was blinded by glaucoma, but she could see much more than anyone else around her.
My grandmother was from Italy, and my grandfather went to her family, and they had three daughters. And the father said, pick which one you want. Okay. And he picked my grandmother because she was the prettiest. And I've been told I look like her. I don't know. I've been to Italy, and some of the relatives say, you look just like your grandmother. Point of my story. They come back, they come to America, they get married. He's a tyrant. He's a tyrant.
Yeah.
And she learns English. She has seven children, and she gets a divorce.
Ooh.
Now, in that day, you did not divorce. I mean, we're talking, really 20s, 1920s. I mean, that with seven children. So she's my role model.
And Italian too, so that was
Yeah,
extremely rare.
yes, that's so your grandmother, she was a pistol. Um, so let's talk about this whole double standard, gender equality. What's your opinion on it today?
Well, it's interesting. I went out to dinner last night with a number of millennials. I used to mentor a lot of people in that age group for business development. So I went out to
Mhm.
their birthday party, and a number of them had already read the book, which surprised me. But they were very vocal in the idea that many of the things that we witnessed, half a century ago are reemerging again. And one of those things was the pursuit of pleasure in the way that you don't worry about getting pregnant or, anything happening to you along the way, like sexual assault and sexual harassment, all the things that I talk about in there. I actually have a rape in there. I have a
Mhm.
sexual assault and I have sexual harassment in the workplace. Now, I have take a comical look at most of these, but what was interesting is they were so attached to feeling like they had hope that, there's a woman who had gone through this back when you couldn't even report something like a rape, and yet they're seeing it again. So they felt like it was like a little bit of some progress on their part so that they could learn from our generation, how to survive what's happening now. And things are rapidly changing and deteriorating for women in the
Yeah.
United States, particularly.
Check, check, check on the sexual assault, sexual harassment. I had all that too in the 60s and the 70s. And of course, when I was growing up, it was the women's feminist movement was just starting. And we had Gloria Steinem and we had all these, beacons of hope that talked about breaking the glass ceiling, and we burned our bras and all that stuff. And I was very excited. And I will say that 20 years ago or whatever, I thought, wow, yeah, we're good now. We're equal. We're pretty equal. And I went out to lunch last year with a friend of mine who happens to be a Black gay male. And I said to him, Yule, the way things are going lately, I think women, people of color, and gays are in big trouble.
Yes.
And he said, I agree. And then guess what happened? Roe versus Wade. I think that shocked the world when that happened. Were you shocked, or was it kind of like, oh,
No, because I have a little bit of, even though I was fairly young, I loved biology, and I knew that it was based on embryology. So I had learned enough from my mother, who was very progressive, in order for me to learn about, she was pregnant and she wanted me to know about the facts of life when I was 12. So she gave me a medical textbook instead of, so I knew all of the Latin terms for everything by the time it was the Roe v. Wade came out, and I understood that it was based on embryology, and I wasn't shocked, but I think if you think about what Ruth Bader Ginsburg was saying, she wanted it to be on the basis of equal gender, which would eliminate the embryology, which would have eliminated the idea that you could only 6 weeks, 15 weeks, whatever. Because if it's like, if a man can't get if a man can get an abortion, so can a woman, kind of thing. And it was way too radical at the time for
yeah,
anyone to think that way. But in some ways, that would have kept it
yeah.
certified and in line, right now.
Well, to me, it's the patriarchal society trying to take over. And because they are trying to do things with the voting that affects people of color, it's very obvious. The stuff about the Supreme Court will boggle your mind. We won't get into that. It's on the news. And my minister, who is gay, he got married when it was made legal back a few years, and now they want to take that away.
Right.
So that is where I get scared that we're going backwards. And it's all for the how could I put it? For white straight men, for their profit and gain. That's what it looks like. Did you watch that Handmaid's Tale? Did you see
Yes,
that?
I actually read it in the 80s as well. So
That's it.
yeah, I've been telling younger women to read it, but they're terrified.
Well, when they read it, they should be terrified because it's exactly what's going on.
Interestingly enough, Margaret Atwood said there is nothing fiction in that book, that everything is historically correct and has happened somewhere or another in the world.
And
she
it's
had,
not happening here.
yeah,
Absolutely terrifies me. Well, and here's another thing. Another thing about the book and the series was that it wasn't the whole United States. It was a part of the United States.
Right.
And that gets me thinking the red blue thing in the red blue states.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my God. Anyway, enough about my nightmares.
It's everybody's nightmares right now.
If you're a woman, gay, or somebody of color, you should be. I'm like you. I have that dark humor. I'm always, making these jokes that other people might go, oh my God. But I just said that's what I do. You know what I want to talk about? I want to talk about the dichotomy of the virgin whore, like men have towards women. Like she's either this wonderful, spotless virgin woman that he wants to marry and have children with, or she's a whore. She had sex before marriage, she's sexually active, she's a whore. Do you have anything about that in your book? That
A little
concept?
bit, yeah, a little bit, because we live in a very a very odd society. We have a schizophrenic society, and even in the 70s, we had on the one hand, and I think I go through it because I start out in the midst of labor, a very difficult labor where I start thinking, how's my daughter ever going to forgive me? Because I start thinking about, the rape, my husband's open marriage, my lover having birth without birth control, making love to him. So I'm thinking of all these things that have happened to me. So then it opens with my childhood, and a lot of that was the confusion of having a father who was strong Sicilian, who taught me that, I should be able to do anything I want, and was very strong about it, and wanted, he would defend us no matter what. We had a situation once when we were told we couldn't play in the streets with the boys, and my father grabbed the bat and the ball and ran out and said, nobody tells my girls what to do. So in that way, he was a feminist. But then when I developed very late, so when I finally developed, he totally panicked and went completely the opposite direction about, you can't do this, you can't do that, you can't shave your legs. And so there was this confusion in my mind, not only from him, but also the way men were reacting. Men I had known my whole life were reacting, because I went from being this tomboy at the age of like 14, 15 and 16, and suddenly have a Marilyn Monroe body. And I developed according to my mother, I developed a very fine sense of sarcasm at that point. So
We have a lot of common. I'm telling you, the whole father thing. My father thought he was half Sicilian because he was adopted.
Right.
And his father that adopted him lied and told him that he was really his biological father, and that the Irish mother had put him in the orphanage because she didn't want him. And the truth of it was, and he went and got him out of the orphanage when he was 4. And the truth of it was, he was not his biological father. And after my father died, I did a ancestry DNA, and it came back. I almost collapsed. I opened it up and it said, on your father's side, he is 100% Irish. Oh my God. So that started me down the rabbit hole. I did research all the way back to the 18th century. And it was so odd because both sides of the family, mothers and father, came from County Mayo, Ireland. So that's odd right there, right? And this fraction all went to Scranton, Pennsylvania. So my father grew up 6 blocks away from his half brother and never knew it.
Oh my.
That's called unearthing my Irish roots. But I used to say I was half Italian. I'm not.
But you feel like it. You embrace it.
But I'm half Irish. That's a big chunk. And the Italian's like dwindling because there's like Greece and Turkey.
Exactly.
But yeah. I just, you made me think of that because my father was a lot like that. But he thought he was Sicilian. He thought he was.
So he acted like it.
He acted like your dad. That's what got me on my tangent. Yeah. And I remember when the back alleys where the boys would play baseball, softball, and I would sit on the grass and watch them. And he dragged me in the house and he said I couldn't do that anymore. So I totally relate to this.
Very confusing when you're a young girl. Yeah, I think I actually have a chapter called The Immaculate Deception when I had my confirmation at the age of 12 in the Episcopal Church, of which I had my mother's medical textbook and the comprehension of what a virgin was and what having sex was, and it didn't match up with what the priest was saying. So I started questioning, how could she be a virgin if then she had a baby, and yet God was supposed to be but then wouldn't God have a very big penis? And that's when the whole, what broke loose. So I probably shouldn't say that on YouTube.
Oh, you'll be saying it today on YouTube. You will be on YouTube later. Yes.
Exactly. So I got into a little bit of trouble for that, but the priest was fairly progressive, thank goodness, and sort of forgave me.
But you didn't have a good explanation, though.
No, I never did find, and I ended with, I think I ended the chapter with something to the effect of, I never did find out how she got pregnant, but I wondered if in the end she was a girl just like me, confused and wondering what her role was in the world.
I'm sure she was.
Yeah, she was 14 or 15, I believe.
Well, that's so young.
Yeah.
So I want to talk about this open marriage. How'd you get into that situation?
Well, I think it was the 70s. There was a lot of experimentation being done. There was a lot of drug use. We were in Southern California. He was actually an oceanographer, and the oceanography group is back in those days, they'd be gone for 2 or 3 months at a time. There'd be no email, there was no emails at the time, there were no phone calls, there's no communication, no letters. So
Mhm.
it was almost as if it was even worse than the Navy, because at least the Navy, I think that you can call. So
Yeah.
it was as if you were this single person and caught in a marriage. And so there was a lot of things happening, on the side that people just accepted. It was almost an accepted belief and pattern. And I used to say I had a quasi open marriage because I didn't really know I was in an open marriage.
I was gonna say, you didn't discuss this with each other.
It came up in odd little moments, and in your way, it's more than 500 miles, and suggestions of what might work better for him. And it wasn't until I'd gone through this for many years and I moved to Boston and I fell in love with this person I'm actually married to. I just got married recently. And I'm married to the same person I had the affair with. It's a very long time ago.
Yeah, that's
Long story
interesting.
short. Yeah. So, but then when I started to back to the double standard, then when I started to have this, I thought, okay, now we're kind of even, and now we'll have kids, and we'll forget that's our past. That part of it's done.
Mhm.
But what I discovered was that it was a one-way street. That he was allowed to have an open marriage, but I was not, and that's when everything broke.
Well, my first husband, okay, was in love with love. He was a sex addict and he was an alcoholic, but he was gorgeous and charming. He looked like James Caan, if you know who James Caan is
Oh
from that,
yeah. Hmm.
but he looked like the young James Caan. He was stunning. And he was Irish. So anyway, but we got married and a cheating started, and I could only forgive once or twice. It was really bad. And then what started happening for me, I call it revenge cheating.
Yeah.
I started cheating. I mean, I didn't go out looking for it, but if you're a pretty girl, young pretty girl, they're just gonna come to you. They don't care if you're married or not. So he would have an affair, and then an opportunity would come along, and I would have an affair. But I always made sure to tell him,
Hmm.
because that was the part that I wanted to hurt him. And I will say this till my dying day. I believed that we both loved each other and we were soulmates, but we were sick. We were damaged people and we had no hope, no hope at all.
I
And
think
go ahead. Go
I think
ahead.
Esther Perel actually wrote, I have a blog that I quote Esther Perel, that she talks about how women, particularly in our age group, it was to a certain extent, an affair was almost an expression of freedom that you were not allowed in any other aspect of society. So you
Yes.
could forgive yourself a little bit.
Oh, I totally did. And actually, the odd thing, and this is in my first book, if I didn't say, was called Raised by Wolves, Trapped by Demons. So the wolves were my parents, and the demons were the men in my life until later when I stopped drinking and realized I had my own demons. Okay.
Anyway.
So the thing with that, with Jack, was his first name, I put up with it 7 years, whatever. And then one day I just said, I have to love myself more than him. I have to do that, or I won't survive. And it was the 100th time I threw him out, but it was the last time. And then 10 years later, I remarried him. I always say I'm like Liz Taylor and Natalie Wood. Remember, they married their spouses twice, Richard Burton and Robert Wagner. And they think Robert Wagner might have killed Natalie, so that wasn't good.
That problem.
There were some problems. But what we're getting back to, when women didn't have very many ways to exert their power, and I know for myself in the 70s and the 80s, domestic violence was not addressed.
Correct.
Not addressed. So that was a big problem. So how do you think women are today as far as feeling sexually equal to men?
Well, I think you do have a more openness, that there is something called ethical porn. corn, I guess you're not supposed to say that either. And women are getting a little more interested in what satisfies them. I think that's a little
Mhm.
bit more open now than it was before.
Yeah.
There are a number of shows that are out there now that talk about, making the sensual room, decorating the sensual
Yeah.
room and exploring risque business and that sort of thing. So I
Mhm.
think they feel more equal in that way. But at the same time, what I'm seeing, especially talking to my millennial friends, is there is a lack of commitment, that
Mhm.
there is no responsibility on the part of the men in their lives to ever make any decisions. And
Never
so that
has.
puts them in, and of course they have the biological time clock going and all that stuff. And so I think they're
Mm.
feeling that it's still not anywhere near equal.
Mhm. No, it's not. And that brings us back to the abortion situation. Uh, Men can get, if they don't want children, they can go get a vasectomy. They can make sure they practice safe sex and wear a condom, right?
Right.
But if a woman doesn't, take birth control pills for whatever reason and everything, and she gets pregnant, then they're telling her, well, you have to keep it,
Yeah.
right? So going on with that idea, um, I've lost my thought from that. It's a good one too. Going along with that idea, I think women they're responsible
Yes.
for the men's mistakes. So if a man doesn't wear a condom and the woman doesn't notice or what gets talked into it or whatever and gets pregnant, it's her fault. No, it was his fault. They will
Yeah.
not share any responsibility. You know what I'm saying?
Yes, and
So,
I think I've been wondering about this. My mother and I were discussing this recently. My mother's 88 and she's still, on top of things. And she
but
wondered why, with all these laws changing and basically losing all reproductive rights and women taking all the burden responsibility, she said, but back 50 years ago, before Roe v. Wade, there was no DNA testing. So she says, don't men understand that can come back to haunt them? Because essentially with
yes.
DNA testing, there's no question. So I think, I mean, I have a son who's the really sweetest guy in the world, and I have two stepsons who are wonderful, and I have a lot of nephews that I really love deeply, and I have two trans nieces that became nephews.
Yeah,
Um,
big
so
world.
yeah, it's a big world, and I listen from their viewpoint, and it's very different reality for them. It's like it's not like sex is the problem, it's the lack of intimacy. That is what's
Yes, I agree.
missing in their lives. And they're missing the comfort and the friendship and being with someone, not just for a sexual reason, but I'm finding that a lot of the younger men want that intimacy that they're not getting anymore. So
I was just reading an article on that. I absolutely was. And the thing of it is, I think about this too, the Viagra commercials are on TV all the time. And, you know, I have health problems. I'm older. I'm 75 years old. I'm going to be 76. I know. I don't look it. That's my little joke. But you should see my CAT scans and then you'd know. But I'm on a lot of medication.
yeah,
So it affects my sex drive.
absolutely.
Well, they don't have any Viagra for women
Mm-hmm.
that I know of.
No,
So there you
not that
go.
work.
Here you go again, right?
Right.
Why don't they make us a pill? I would take it. I would take it if my husband wanted sex. I would take it. He'd have to take his too. But do you notice that?
Mhm.
And they're not researching it, I don't think, or anything.
They,
It's like,
they are a little bit, but what
oh,
they're discovering is the women's reproductive organs are much more complex, and that the part of the body what I call the man in the boat actually it's the same epithelial tissue as the man's body part, but it has 20,000 times more nerve endings. So it gets
oh,
more complex in order to how do you stimulate this piece. And
uh,
they found that it may be just testosterone gel may be the only thing that works on women. So I think it's throwing people off a little bit, and they are very far behind on the research, but
oh.
you
And
know.
some things they just get terrified of. I mean, I think anything that might lead to us being able to do anything they can do scares them. It's like
Yes,
we
I
have
think
to,
that's exactly what
right?
this is what I think the extreme right wing is very upset about is if they don't control women's reproduction, then they can't control women. So their first step is that, okay, you just got to be at home having babies. Doesn't matter if they have a college degree or not, or whether you career or not, doesn't matter. And that therefore,
Yes,
then from there, everything can go back into its perfect harmony, you
they're
know.
trying. There was just I think he was a congressman, but a politician, and he was giving the graduation.
Oh, that was that was actually a quarterback, I think. Yeah.
But the commencement speech, and you're right, and he said about basically women should stay home and have children, and all these women here that are getting their degree, that's really what's on their mind.
Right. They really are being,
Yeah.
fooled.
And in 1966, when I wanted to go to college, thought I was going to go to college and become a teacher, my parents told me they waited till senior year. No, because you're just going to get married and have children.
Right.
And
Actually, yeah, that happened to me too. I was like, well, I did not go apply to college, and here I was a Regents winner, and I had very high SAT score, and I had extracurriculars, and I was working and everything else. But I was told that, well, but why would I waste money, spending a girl to go to college? So I basically left home at 17 and took care of it and got my own
I
education.
admire that. I wish I had, I'm going to say balls.
I've been accused. I have been accused.
to to do something like that. I brought up joining the service, and they said, "Oh, only whores do that." And the Peace Corps, it's too dangerous. And I was looking for anything, but why I call them wolves, is they wanted me to be a worker bee and stay at
Yep.
home and keep making money for the family.
Mhm,
So
exactly.
basically my first marriage was an escape attempt.
Oh, yes, yes, I
And
would.
I
Yep.
still had a hard time getting to do it. Now I don't want to leave us on a sad note about my marriages. I am married to my present husband. I'm with him 35 years. I'm
Oh,
married to him 35 years. I'm with him 37. So
okay.
all men are not bad.
Well, since I've married to the man I knew in 1985, then in the 1990s, and then again 10 years for the last 10 years. And it took me a while to figure out, it took us a while we had a love ceremony, and then we actually legally got married, but for
Yeah.
the first,
Well, that's it. My husband was in my high school class,
yeah.
but we weren't in the same part group, the kids that hang out with certain kids. So we knew each other's names, and that was about it. And our 20th high school reunion, I say, was our first date
Okay.
because we were both there alone.
Yeah.
And towards the end of the night, I said, "Well, I'm meeting friends for a drink. Do you want to come?" And that was it. That was it for the next 37 years. But I got lucky, finally, or rewarded or something. But this is
But there's also
great.
the danger. I mean, I actually got married for safety reasons because
Well,
there are the danger. I mean, I left home at 17, but it also ended up with my being homeless and sick and
yes. Yeah.
penniless. And I was sexually assaulted again after being raped. And so I decided I needed somebody to protect me. So of course
Oh,
I married somebody who's gone out to sea all the time. That makes a lot of sense.
we're like twins. The guy I divorced and married 10 years later, part of it was my second husband, when I divorced him, stalked me for 2 years
Mm,
and beat me up and did all these horrible things. And he was connected, and the
mhm.
police would not do anything. And when I ran into my first husband, the spark was still there. And I thought, oh, he'll stand up to him because he loves me.
Yeah.
Like I said, we were soulmates. We just were sick. We're very sick. And he did. And he stood up to him. And that's how I married him again. Isn't that interesting? Like the safety issues that we bring up. Yeah. And then, of course, I got rid of him 7 years later because I don't know why, but he didn't change. He got worse.
Yeah, that happens a lot.
People think, oh, it's 10 years. He's more mature. But so what do you see next for yourself? You have a lot going on.
Well, I do write a lot of what I call blarticles. There's blogs that are articles. I used to be a reporter, so I have a tendency to throw in the history and the research. And I've been writing some things on the Comstock law from 1873 that have been forming the court orders in the South to keep women from reproduction rights. So I'll be doing a lot of that sort of thing. And those are I have a website, SueCamaione.com. It
Yeah, I
has
was
some
gonna ask you, and is the blog on that site too?
the blogs are on that side, how you get hold, how you can order the book, that sort of thing. And then the next book I would like to write, and I've just started, is to write a dark comedy. It'll be based on a true story. I won't make this a memoir. And it will have domestic violence in it. So,
Yeah.
but I will find a comical way of dealing with it. And my friends are like throwing, like, if there's anybody can do it, it's me, they say. But
Now, I think
it's a sensitive issue, but I survived it and I lived it, and I do want to feel that I need to share it with other women, so that the ones that I have shared with, I've helped quite a bit, helping them to get out, because
it does, it
people
does.
don't realize when you're leaving domestic violence, the most dangerous moment is leaving.
Oh,
And that's
gosh, yes.
because they wonder why don't you leave? Well, it's a mixed
It's
bag.
not that easy, right? And they find you. I left to move to another town and he found me. Um, did I ask you if you had a podcast? I might have.
I
Did I?
do not have a podcast.
It's not that hard, but we'll talk again because we have so much in common, I think anyway. And we're interested in the same topics, definitely, and seem to share the same views. And I could see that there are other topics we could sort of hone it down a little bit instead of being so general. Are you up to that? Coming
Oh,
on again?
absolutely. You're inspiration, Mimi.
I am.
Absolutely. I
Well,
always say
go ahead.
the I'm sorry, the age thing came up recently, and I had a book launch, and I had about 15 young people there, and we were taking our pictures, and one of them said, "Well, how old are you?" Because I was talking to someone, and I said, "Well, I'm the perfect age to be writing this book on sex." And they said, "What?" I said, 69.
Which is the sexual number to begin with. So that was to crack them up.
Perfect reason I wrote the book.
Well, real quick, I'll tell you, I hope we don't get cut up. I went to a wedding in December, and it was my daughter remarrying, and my grandson, who's 16, was there. He brought two friends. I went over to introduce myself, and the one boy turned around and he said, "Are you Condo Mimi?" Now that's my internet name.
I see that.
And I said, "Yes, I am." And he went, "Oh, I can't believe this is happening." He turned not to laugh. And my grandson said, "He's your biggest fan, Nana. He bought your book, he read your book, and he follows you on Instagram." 16-year-old boy.
Wow.
I was in the process of writing a workbook to heal trauma and abuse in women. I went home, threw it away, rewrote it for every gender, every type of sexual identity.
Really?
Changed the name, and on the flyleaf I have dedicated to Kyle Connor.
Oh,
Yeah, and he's thrilled. He's thrilled. But I bring that up because you don't know who you're going to reach.
yes.
I mean,
That's
there's
right.
violence, there's domestic abuse, there's alcoholism, there's so many things in my book that might touch his life too. So that's good. Well, I'm glad you're right. I can't wait to read the first one. And I'm going to send you a digital copy of my first one. You have an iPhone?
Yes, I do.
Okay. Let me send that out. So then when we have our next in, you'll know all about it. All right. Thanks again, Sue. I hope everybody enjoyed this because I thought it was a very stimulating conversation. And thanks again for coming.
And thank you so much for having me, Mimi. It's been such a pleasure.
Oh, I can't wait to do it again.
All right, thanks.